Hello, hello. Here you go. We need to tweet. Okay, do you have any questions? Any career-related question? What did I say last time? Want to talk about your software engineering career goals, woes? Then oh boy do I have the stream for you. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Thought you saw some text in chat earlier? No, definitely not. I don't know what you're talking about. I'll explain for anyone watching this later in a sec. Another group mentoring session. If you'd like to talk about your career in computer science and some advice, come ask questions now. There. I think it's pretty good. Yeah, then maybe add in some hashtags. Software engineering, mentoring. I didn't do any research into this. Also, the last one got like 5 likes. It's not a question of that so much as it is I want to pull in people who haven't already been part of these because I feel like that's what's going to renew the questions that come in. Yeah, I think this is good. So tweet that, and then let's also go over to Discord. The stream is now live. Group mentoring number 3. Ask career advice questions. All right, so that stuff's done. Now I want to say what this was all about. So I was just coding something really fast, and it's 2 if statements right now, but the problem was trying to figure out how to log the console, and I could not figure out how to do this. The way that this works, this is all running in PhantomBot, and PhantomBot was coded in Java and has some like JavaScript running system through it. And it used to be that it had a print command. I don't think this exists anymore. And so you can't just say console.log. That doesn't work. And so yeah, I just logged to chat. So here's what we're gonna do for today. I should probably keep this open. This will be my, hey Wes, this will be my kind of buffer that we have here. So I need to put some text saying somewhere, what does this say? Adam is not reading chat. Ha, that's a lie. Okay, so type add queue for question to add your question to the queue. Yeah, this is a brand new system. And now I want this somewhere else on the screen. But where? This is pretty good. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Hey Sigma, hey Squid, how you guys doing? How's everybody doing? Maybe I offset this by a tiny bit. There we go. Yeah, I think that's good. Hey Catagon, yeah, new job is going well. I wonder if I should update that. Oh yeah, I also have to update the today command, although it's probably still accurate. The second group mentoring session, it's close enough. I'll just copy paste the whole thing. The third group mentoring session, use the add queue command to get your question in the queue. Okay. Hey Floopy Copy, hey Krasner, hey Gluskup. So last time, we've done this twice now before, and I think they were both really good sessions. We chatted for something like 3 hours each time. I guess I could just find out exactly what it was by clicking this link. It was, yeah, like 3.5 hours each time, which is pretty good. And that was like nonstop, just giving as much career advice as I could give, whatever other answers to questions I could provide. But one of the problems that we had is that you guys would have to look at what the timestamp is. So right now, for example, it is 9:04. And so if you saw me reading a chat message from here, you obviously knew that I was delayed in chat. For the people who'd already been here, that worked pretty well because they knew how the system worked. But for people who are coming in, I think they'd probably ask a question and maybe wait 5 or 10 minutes and realize like, what is going on right now? He's not reading any of chat that I see. And so what we're going to try today is this new system that I just made where there's add queue, and this is something anyone can use, and this is something only I can use. And this is a really, really simple question queuing system. So it's literally just appending it to an array, and then I'm getting it and it's typing out the chat message again. So we'll see if this works. Yeah, you can just do add queue and then your question. And if people end up adding, yeah, like I said, the system's not very mature. So if people just end up typing a question without calling add queue, then yeah. And so now I need to do, hey leftist, hey Vengeful, I need to do get queue even if I see the message here so that I pull them all off correctly. So how are you today? I'm doing well. Feeling pretty good. I took yesterday off of work. I think I needed it. And so I've got a long weekend now. Just going to try to relax. We got some snow here in Washington. Let me do the next one. Get Q. Now, a month after the conclusion of everything, do you still have the same feelings you did in your postmortem? Oh, now months after. Yeah. So let me make this take up half the screen. I generally feel pretty good about how everything went. I look at my last 5 years as being the two endeavors of Adam Learns and Botland. Botland, I think the important part is I learned a ton. I don't think there was a world where it would have been successful unless I'd already learned those things and then tried that. And Adam Learns, I think it did well, but it didn't have enough time. And so there were just a lot of forces kind of pulling me in every direction. But yeah, I feel generally pretty good about that stuff. Developing a self-serving theory, curious on thoughts. There's one other person on my team. That this is the first large order. Oh, I see. Everyone else is coming from their fangs. I get the sense that startup folks are really hungry to produce team biz value than traditional fang folks. Have you experienced anything like this? I haven't really been at my company or seen a whole lot of different people for long enough to say anything about this. So I've interacted with my team, and there's all sorts of different kind of experiences that come with that. The people on my team seem to be pretty good. And they've also been there for long enough where I don't see this trend yet. So it's possible this is a thing. But yeah, I haven't necessarily seen it. Andorn, hey Darkmoon. All right, let's pop the next question off the queue. The airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow. I've been doing my workouts in front of this monitor sometimes because I just have a resistance band that I've been using. And I put on Monty Python on Netflix. And I am about halfway through it now. So I haven't made it very far. Okay, let's pop the next one off the queue. What's your suggestion for starting my own technical blog? I think the very first thing is figure out your goals. So is it to build an audience? Is it to get your thoughts out there? Is it to make money? What is it? And that's really important because you can't figure out if you're hitting your goals if you don't know what your goals are. And so for me, I have a blog, and mostly it was supposed to be something where I guess my own goals are to list these out. One was provide value for people, and two is have a reference point that I can link to. So whenever anyone asks, hey, how do I go about learning programming? I've got that post I wrote back in like 2016 now that I could be like, look, here are all my thoughts. I don't have any newer thoughts, or else I would have added them to the blog post. And then anyone who just stumbles upon the blog posts themselves will get that value too. So those are my goals. And then when it comes to starting it, it was like, okay, now I answer the question of like, how do I meet those goals? And so if it's make money, you're probably going to want to find an advertiser or some advertising library. I don't know exactly how this works because I haven't done it for my blog. And you want to spread the word. You want to market maybe. You want to make sure you've got some content. You want a schedule. There are all sorts of different things you can try to plan for that. Hey, Vlad. Hey, Crows. You want to build an online presence? But like, I guess that could be a goal, but I look at that as like an intermediate goal, that there's something else that you might want as part of that. So what is the online presence for? Is it for eventually finding a job? Is it for connecting with people, etc.? Regardless, it sounds like you should look into just the first part about getting the blog online, because no matter what, that's one of the first things you have to do. And it might be reusing another platform. So something like dev.to or Medium or really anything. Okay, let's keep going through this stuff. Let's see if this new system is working. I should have had it print out what the number question is. So question 5 of 7, for example. All right, well, we'll write that on the list, I guess. Host Ramy is not on this for now. Let's do this. So the question, I don't know where it's typing. The question queue for get queue should print question number 5 of 7. Yeah. Okay. I've been hobby learning Python since graduation, but I find myself not actively programming unless I have a hypothetical I want to jump into Python and test out. Do you have any recommendations on keeping my Python skills sharp enough to confidently say, put it on my resume? So, well, let me keep everything together here, I guess. Yeah, so for something like this is why I say this thing about goals so frequently, about it's good to list out what you want and why you want it. So if you want to say that your Python skills are sharp, I do think you should probably make sure that they're actually sharp instead of just saying it and then putting it on your resume. And doing that means that you excuse me, you should probably have some projects here. So you've said you have these hypotheticals and then they lead to you doing something. Why not come up with more hypotheticals now and try to see how that can play into projects? So maybe you've always been like, I want to learn how to emit images through Python or transform them or something. And then maybe go start that project. That's one way to look at things, is kind of the project focused way. And the other is sort of the gaps focused way, where you could think, what don't I know how to do? And then go pursue that. So maybe there's a certain subset of Python you've never really used. Maybe there are frameworks or libraries you want to try out, or maybe there are just domains you want to apply it to, like web development. Hey, Aurelio. Hey, Physitronic, Draco, Jack. Hi, everybody. Hey, Jiraiya. Yeah, and by the way, I hope you guys are okay with this kind of question queue system. I think it's going to work a little bit better because I can always stay on top of chat. So for the first, you would say put conscious effort into finding these hypotheticals instead of just letting them. Yes. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, is that way you come up with these projects a little bit sooner rather than just when this strikes you. But this is why the goals part is important. If you're doing this for just kind of fun, for kind of learning, then it doesn't really matter when you do these projects, what the size of the projects would be. But if you're doing it for your resume, which it sounds like you are, then yeah, that's where I would probably say light a little bit more of a fire underneath you. Okay, next question. Is that a new bed frame? Looks like a new bed frame. No, it's the same bed frame. It's just rotated. What did you miss? You didn't miss anything, really. I was saying that this new system that I have of adding questions and then getting questions, this is new. And I want to pilot this so that I'm always kind of at the bottom of chat here. I think I said on top of chat earlier. No. Yeah, before when I would do these streams, I would be something like 20 minutes behind on everything. And I think it still went well enough, but this might be a little bit smoother. I think some of these other systems, some of these other changes I could do is maybe highlight which question I'm answering. Like obviously there can be a lot more work put into this. Fooled again by perspective. Yep. By the way, I haven't forgotten about your message, Leftist. I am going to get back to you at some point. Have you tried Vim? Yeah, I used Vim probably seriously for maybe 2 to 3 months, something like that. And my general take from using Vim is that it's a very, very good editing experience, but I did not like the programming experience. And I think it's just that I didn't customize it enough. Customizations looked a little bit scary. It was just directly editing Vim RC back then. Things have probably changed. This was, I don't know, like 9-10 years ago. Can I put more questions into add queue or should I separate them? Yeah, you can put multiple questions in if you want, sure. Or you could, yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. But whatever, we're both learning this as we go. Okay, so let's see the next one. Could it be an idea that mods can answer or remove questions from the queue by ID because we've already answered that question? Yeah, I think we could kind of do something like this. Although if I develop out this system, I think there are a lot of different things I would do. Probably, yes, some sort of web layer that's serving this so that mods could see the questions, maybe remove some, kind of some filtering. Tried Vim for a couple weeks, but it was too hard to change my habits, so I left. Yeah, and the thing is, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. I think it's always worth trying new things, and then it's always worth figuring out what value is it giving you. I think there's a trend of like looking at hot new technology and then thinking, how can we apply this to our project? I don't think that's a bad idea of how can we apply this to our project. I think what becomes a bad idea is when people just start applying it without answering that question. And this is kind of how I look at almost everything in life, is like you should never really be totally confident in anything. Like always kind of question things, always try things out. And so Vim is just one of those things. If you didn't try it, you should definitely try it. It doesn't take very long. You can at least learn what it's all about in probably like 30 to 45 minutes. You can't learn how to use Vim in that amount of time. I think in order to get comfortable with it, it takes much longer, but still, you can find out why people like it. Hey, Nui, and hey, Tigra. Where did you host your Academy site? I think that's all answered there. Yeah. Yeah, so check out that command. Okay, let's see what's next on here. I'm an IT director planning to build a new asset system and various other tools that pull mostly data from our SQL farm. What would you recommend for me to use for front and back end? So an IT director planning to build a new asset system. I think whenever I consider, so IT director implies you're kind of at a company, you've got maybe many other employees, whether they report to you or not. And so one of the questions I ask here is what's a fit for them? So what programming languages do they tend to know? What frameworks do they tend to know? And that might pare down this list right off the bat. So if everyone's coding in, let's say, Java, you're probably not going to just start picking some like, well, let's use PHP and whatever else. Like, no, you'll probably stick to Java for something like this. So let's see, various other tools that pull mostly data. So then the other thing I would probably think about here, and I'm speaking generally because this is sort of a specific question, and I don't think I can give a very specific answer here, but I look at what is existing out there, or like, yeah, what exists already that you could just use off the shelf, and then what custom things need to be built. So when I talked about the fit, even if something exists, you still need to consider that fit in mind because people are going to be maintaining this. And then, yeah, what other needs do you have? So is there something specific you need out of the front end, the back end? So I know I haven't given any sort of like, you should code it in JavaScript and do this and whatever else, but I think that's because there are more variables that fit into this picture. And hopefully some of that advice helps. Feel free to ask a follow-up question. I'm happy to continue trying to answer this. Hey, Varun. All right, let me see. I'm ignoring kind of all the add queue ones for now because I'm going to get to those later. First time seeing the stream live after quite a few months. Hope everything's okay. Yeah, everything's okay. If you type the Google command, this kind of explains why I'm streaming on this schedule. Can you host your Express app free? I think you should have added that to the question queue, to be honest, but I'll answer that anyway, and then I'll pop the next question off the queue. Can you host your Express app for free? No. The way that Firebase works is Firebase has a database. It has some way of running like Lambda functions, and it has hosting and authentication and some other things too. What it does not have, this hosting is like, it's static hosting. So what it doesn't have is it's not just VMs where you get to run whatever code you want. You can run whatever code you want inside of these Lambda or Cloud functions, but they're kind of on demand. Hey Hanson, yeah, check out the Google command. That kind of explains why my schedule has changed. Okay, next question. So I've been using React and Next for about 4 to 5 months. Should I jump into TypeScript? The type system kind of scares me, and I feel like it would slow me down considerably. Yeah, so here's my take on this. TypeScript has a learning curve, and then it has the payoff from that learning curve. And the payoff is what you gain from static typing. So finding bugs at compile time rather than at runtime. So one of the main questions you could ask yourself is, how much time have you lost due to any typing related issues that would not be lost if you were on TypeScript? And then you kind of play that into this whole equation of, well, how long would it take me to learn? How long would it take me to migrate my code? How long would it take me for me to be comfortable? So in the long run, is it worth it? Almost certainly. For right now, let's say you had some deadline of you were trying to get something done like 2 weeks from now. It is almost certainly not worth it because then you should consider the velocity at which you're able to code without knowing it. So there's a bit of a trade-off, but I would say this. If you want kind of a more consumable way of looking at this, break off small pieces of TypeScript and try just learning those at first. And then slowly build up to the point where you feel like it's not as much of a jump for you. Maybe better if the questions could be submitted in a place other than chat. Yeah, I agree. I will write that down too. Yeah, these are things I literally just coded this system in the half an hour before the stream started. So I do want to improve this if we end up going this route. And I think it'd be pretty good. Hey TS. I think you preemptively answered a question unless I actually asked how you were doing. But I'm glad to hear that you're good. And I'm doing well too. All right, I've been trying lots of new recipes. Any personal favorites I should try? Oh, That's very tough. I don't I don't generally enjoy cooking too much, but can't beat a good chili. Let's go with chili. Although I don't have a specific recipe for you, unfortunately. Probably put it off for a couple weeks, and yeah, and I think that's totally fine. And then I think if you ever get a half hour here or there, then yeah, you could always take a look. And a question was just to ask of how did you learn TypeScript, and I'll talk about that in a sec. So Dexa, that might help you out too. Okay. So I was thinking about writing articles on LinkedIn to make myself more attractive to recruiters. How should I approach this? Do I need to write something revolutionary, or can I try something new and write my experience no matter how amateur it is? Second question, I wonder, how do you do the next step in programming? I'm on a new job for 1 month, but it feels like I didn't make any big progress. Still the same things. Learn the template they use for the front, back, and database, repeat what they did. Okay, so there are a couple of big things to parse from this. One is you're looking at doing this on LinkedIn. I unfortunately can't speak to too much of the LinkedIn ecosystem here because generally I very strongly dislike LinkedIn and try to cancel my accounts as soon as possible whenever I feel I need it, and then I just deactivate it. So right now it's deactivated because I have a job that I'm happy with. So I can't comment too much on how you'd go about doing this, but I imagine you should think about this the same way you'd always think about this, which is, what value am I providing to my audience? That's it. Your audience in this case is not LinkedIn recruiters, even though it might seem like it. Your audience is whatever the blog post will be targeted at. So let's say you're writing a blog post on like Java techniques, then you're probably targeting kind of newish Java developers, and that's it. And so as a recruiter, they're going to look at that and say, do I think that this provides value to the audience as well? Like, is this person a good writer, etc.? With all that said, I think that a blog is kind of one route that you can go about becoming more attractive to recruiters. And I think another one is a portfolio. Another one is kind of just your resume itself. I think that your blog lumps into your portfolio a bit, but it might be more visible to just have projects in your portfolio and show that you know technologies rather than you know how to talk about technologies. So that's my 2 cents there. The second question, how do you do the next step in programming? You feel like you're just looking at what exists and then building onto that. I think that's part of what programming is. So let me copy paste this here. I think that's part of what programming is. It's kind of understanding what goes on and then being able to build on that. So I guess I would ask something like, have you learned anything? Are you happy with how things are going? Do you look at coworkers and think you'd enjoy the job if you were in their shoes? And the reason I asked this last question is because you've been there for a month. After you've been there for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, you might have a different view. And so if you talk to your coworkers and say, hey, look, here's how I'm feeling. And they say, oh yeah, I feel the same way. And I felt that way ever since, month number 1. And I've been here now for 2 years. And they say that they're happy with it. They say that they're not happy with it. That's how I think you'll find out the most. So I guess my advice here is talk to your coworkers and mention this and see how they feel. It might give you a new perspective on this. How'd they notice you, or did you apply to a job? Yeah, I was referred by a friend and I applied through that. So yeah. Stealing this idea openly to deactivate LinkedIn faster than an override could. So I think LinkedIn started as kind of everything starts, which is with the right intentions. It was supposed to be like a social network for professionals. And then it turned into a social network for professionals. And I say those are 2 different connotations. I think at first it was like, hey, how do we share advice and articles and whatever else? And then it turned into, I mean, I guess I should phrase it like this way, like Facebook for professionals. And now I feel like it's, how much can you air your own accomplishments? How can you get people to endorse your skills, etc.? I don't exactly like what that turned into. So, okay, we're up to question 16 and I just answered question 13. Okay, so we're not too far behind. Learn new ways to do stuff, but I always think about new steps is where I can do something alone. Not a good approach in my case. I work with my boss. Oh, 2 developers. I see. Yeah, that's definitely going to be a little bit different of an experience. So I would, at any time someone's a month in, if you're like tearing your hair out, then I would say, okay, you probably have a decision you need to make. But at 1 month, I would always say give it a little more time and kind of see how things pan out. And then set some goals for yourself. I should really talk about goals all the time, but set some goals for yourself. Where do you want to be in a year? Is it that you're making bigger decisions? Is that scope even there? And then I would say talk to your boss about these goals. and see, are they feasible? What's the path to them? How can your boss help? Hey, Memphis. Yeah, senior developer essentially. Hey, Taurus. Yeah, do they fit the company's need? Yep, exactly. That's another good question, and that's something that your boss can help you with for sure. Okay, I'm reading a programming book for C without being in CS or college. Every now and then I come across CS words such as data structures and algorithms, time complexity, other CS stuff. Not being in university, do I need to learn all of this? If so, what things from CS do you think is important? This is a really good question and relatively novel, I think. So these terms that you're coming across, it's like, do I need to learn them? The answer is yes, with the caveat of eventually. So for right now, I always encourage people to focus on only two things when you're starting this. Are you having fun, and are you learning something? Because these other things can come with time. And when we talk about data structures and algorithms, it's not like you learn, it's not like it would be a chapter in a book. It would be like a whole book or many books. and both of them are their own entire set of concepts. So you could talk about just data structures, you can talk about just algorithms, and you can do so for a while. Whereas something like an if statement, you kind of just learn it and you're done, and now you know what an if statement is. So I would say focus on these things for now. You have, maybe I'm inferring this wrong, but it sounds like you're maybe younger than college age, in which case, yeah, I don't think you should worry about anything. Sounds like you're kind of on track, especially if you plan on going to college or getting a CS degree. Those things will come up, and then you'll have the foundation from when you were just focusing on kind of fun and learning. Now, if you do want to delve into those things, I will say, like I said here, do I need to learn them? The answer is yes. They are important, and I think you should eventually know them. So the more you can kind of put a dent in that knowledge now, the better. One thing that I really like, there's a subreddit called Explain Like I'm 5. I think getting just a high-level overview of what these things are, so understanding what time complexity is, understanding what a data structure is when you use it, what an algorithm is, and at a high level, these things are pretty easy to understand. Like knowing that an algorithm is just like the code of a problem solution. That's about it, right? But obviously there's more to that than just that one sentence summary. So I think just getting a high level overview, and then if anything strikes your fancy here, just look into it some more. Greedy person who always wants to make big jumps in for myself, so often I have too big expectations. Yeah, and that's why I say, as much as you can talk to your boss about this, I think that will temper those expectations. And then if you feel like your boss can't provide the avenue to these big jumps you want to make, then it is potentially worth looking into another job. I think it's still worth giving this first one a little bit more time so that you feel like you've got some achievements under your belt, which will make the shift easier. Thank you, Hanson. Suggest to learn types of data structures, try to use or implement them. That could be interesting. Sorting and search algorithms. Yeah, I think this is good. I think that the balance you need to strike is, do you find those things fun? And are you enjoying them? Because if so, by all means, pursue them. But what you don't want to have happen is you're having fun. You're like, I mean, I guess imagine this. You're doing a hobby. You're trying to learn how to play piano. And someone's like, no, the only way to learn it is to go about, like, you need to practice scales and intervals and music theory. And you're like, well, I was just having fun kind of playing some notes, and I didn't do it the best maybe. But, and I'm not saying that that's what Physitronics getting at, but I think there's that risk of, if you go too formally into something, that you might lose that motivation you had. Yeah, and you totally could pursue some more in your free time, it sounds like. I don't think that's a problem. I think if you're not getting satisfaction from your job, supplementing it with your own personal projects is not a bad idea. Okay, Human Puppet, do you mind just doing add Q for that same question? I'm trying to make sure I get to these in the same order they were asked. How did you learn TypeScript? So I wouldn't say I fully learned TypeScript, but what I did, I think I looked through this. Yep, just TypeScript for JavaScript programmers. And this is the 5-minute thing, but I looked through probably everything in the handbook. And from that, I got like a decent understanding. And I took all these notes, which are available via the notes command. So I never got to the point where I was applying any of that knowledge, which means, can you really say that you've learned it? And yeah, so I have an understanding of TypeScript without having really thoroughly used it. Yeah. Okay, let me go to the next one. All right, so follow up, it'll mostly be all me. I've used PHP, React, and Node previously. We've decided it'll be bespoke to suit our needs, so most will be custom. Yeah, so then what I would say is probably you want to go with some combination of what you've already used. So PHP, React, Node. what makes the most sense is you mentioned React, so that's a front end and it's in JavaScript, and you mentioned Node and that's a back end and it's in JavaScript. So it sounds like doing something like this might be a pretty decent system. With that said, I still think you should probably look into what prior art is already out there. You might be able to save yourself quite a lot of time. I think that as I've kind of been through some of these projects myself, I realize that a lot of the time you can spend just kind of months working on a system that already exists out there. And this happened to me a long time ago. We needed some XML parsing. I think I was an intern at the time, so this was a long time ago. And I thought, oh, I'll just code it myself. Well, parsing XML, coming up with like a smooth way to do this, it's possible, obviously. It's just not something that I should ever be spending my time on, given that libraries already exist out there. So as much as you can, try to reuse systems that exist. With that said, yeah, doing things in this system, I mean, this totally works. Really, whenever I look at any of this, it's pretty much you combine a back end and a front end, and is the person comfortable? Does it suit their needs? If those things are met, there's definitely a possible path through it. So there is a possible path through this too, and it's kind of a tried and true set of technologies that have been used. Very popular technologies, lots of support. Yeah, new commands for today. I'm trying to take the advice. I know you'd suggested this too, Define Evil. Hey, I'm very happy belated birthday. I'm sorry, I have not been getting to Discord messages on time, birthday messages on time. Okay, let's go to the next one. Hey, Rexlock. And hey, Rex. If I'm 30 years old and spend the last few years being a data analyst, coding in Python, a lot of data wrangling, now I'm transitioning to software development? Oh. And I'm seeing if I should go to university, boot camp, or take half year and focus on self-learning. Any advice? It's kind of like what I just mentioned with this whole, there's a back end and there's a front end, and so it can work. Any of the paths you mentioned can work. And so what do you prefer? And let's say we got kind of three of these. We got university, well, at least I think three that you said, boot camp, self-learning. By the way, there is actually a fourth path, which is just getting a job in software development and then just kind of learning on the job. So like I said, any of these can work. Do you feel that you need structure? Do you feel that you benefit from having other people who are also learning? Do you feel that you benefit from having a teacher for these things? Do you feel that you can guide yourself better than other people can? Do you think that you can learn under a high pressure environment? And when I say high pressure, I mean like getting a job that you might not feel like you're ready for, I guess. So all of those are questions that will help steer you toward an answer here. And just know that you can't really go wrong if you're really focused on your goal anyway. Like, it's not like if you end up in a boot camp and you should have been at university that, oh, well, your hopes are dashed and that's it. It's over. So yeah, I think this all comes down to just what are your preferences and how have you learned in the past. Birthday clock is early. Wait a second, but you said, oh man. All right, I'll have to look. Title of document is, oh, Botland. It's because those are the first words in the document. Oh man. Hey, Ski Dog. Hey, Bioane. Okay, I think I answered everything. No, there's one more question before the one from Divine Evil. So you once showed me some blog for React a few weeks ago. You said that you consider it one of the best texts for React. I wanted to read it, but I can't find it. It was done by that famous developer, Dan Abraham. Is that his name? Abraham? Abrams? Oh god, I can't remember now. He made React or Express. I don't remember which one. Abramov? Okay. Yeah, shows how much I'm paying attention. All right, blog for React a few weeks ago. I think I might have been talking about the one for React hooks. And I think that was a very specific one. So I'm not positive if that's what... Let me see if I can find this though. Well, okay, the official docs I do think are very good. But I'm trying to find that blog post. Here it is. Yeah, Dan Abramoff. This one might be it that you're talking about. But I really don't remember exactly. But this is a very long blog post on just use effect. It says 49-minute read. And in this time, the goal is to drill into you 1 or 2 points. and that's it. And it's like, I think it's a good read. But yeah, this is a very specific one, so I'm not sure if that's what you were talking about. Nice, Damie. Always learn on new jobs when work for you. Yeah, and that's why, like I said, any of these paths can work, and it's all about what works for the person asking the question here. So, yep, for some people, just learning on the job is going to be great. For other people, they're going to feel like, oh, I'm in over my head. I wish I'd learned a little bit more before this. How has Dave not lost his VIP yet? You don't lose your VIP in this channel. You're always very important to me. I ended up getting to do an assessment for Amazon after graduating last October. Got to the second phase, ended up way over my head. Definitely would need a few more months of prep before I'm ready for that kind of job. Pretty demoralizing after spending years on a degree. I think this is pretty common working at a big company, especially if you go right from, let's say, college into that company. I remember feeling the same general way of like, what did I just learn? What was that degree for? I feel like none of it's applying right now. And then once you realize you go from job A to job B, and I'm just making up a number here, but let's say like 30% of the knowledge actually transfers between those jobs. This is something that I think it's sort of unfortunate when you think about it, because you think, oh, I'm in the same industry. I should be able to just keep building up these skills, and then by the end of it, I'll have skills for everything, right? But yeah, it doesn't really end up working that way. And a lot of the reason why is because of the specific technology and tools and methodology of any particular company. So that even if you're using JavaScript between two different companies, probably their systems are going to look very different. Given this stream multiple lifetimes of value. Denon, if you don't mind asking that with the add queue command, I'm trying to make sure I'm getting to everyone and doing this kind of in order. Yeah. Don't be demoralized. And by the way, I don't know if you saw the imposter syndrome. Did I make a command for this? You might want to check that out, because that could help. I wrote a blog post, for anyone who didn't see this, I wrote a blog post on battling imposter syndrome. I think it's not a very long read, and it should help a little bit at the very least. Oh, thanks, Dorito. Thanks for watching it. Yeah, I'm trying to start working on my April Fool's joke for this year. I haven't talked about what it's going to be, but I'll share in very broad strokes. It's probably going to be a recorded video. I don't think I'm going to do something live. So I just need to find the time to do all the work. God, it's going to take like 10 hours probably. All this for a joke. Like that, I spent even more time than that last year on that joke. I don't know if I have that. April Fool's. Yeah, that one. Oh, yeah, 12 to 14 hours. Oh boy. If you don't have motivation while learning, you'll probably burn out. Yep. That's my take. It's better to learn at a slow rate and do things kind of, I wouldn't say the wrong way, but maybe not the best way, rather than trying to do them the best way and then burning out and then not learning at all. You're on this very precarious path when you start out with anything, where kind of the smallest nudge in the wrong direction can just turn you off of that for the rest of your life. And so I remember I was trying to learn how to play violin, and this is relatively recent, maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that, 7 years ago. And I was just a few months in, and I got a comment of like, oh, that doesn't sound very good. And I thought, well, that's it, I'm done. I'm never playing this instrument again. It's like, I was only playing for a few months. I never played a stringed instrument in my life before. But yeah, it was just that whole precarious starting point. Oh, good. Yeah, I think you'll like it. Let me know. Okay. The grinder, you always realize you always. Yep. Yeah, closer experience to Saxon. Yeah. And it can go in either direction, really. This is why I think if you're ever the mentor of somebody else, you need to make sure to apply some amount of praise and validation, and not just making it up. It's not like, oh, you did a really good job doing Hello World there or something. It's like, wow, look at the progress you've made. Look at what you didn't know coming into this. Look at what you know now. This is exactly the nudge people need in the right direction to let you know you're on the right path. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Decided I want to do a small 2.5-week project just to get a feel for what doing a side project will be like. How can I scope appropriately? What's nice about this is to get an idea for what the side project will be like. Let's say you accidentally scoped it just wildly wrong and it was a 2-year-long project and you still spend 2.5 weeks working on it. You'll still get that experience. You won't finish it because it's a 2-year project that you're doing in 2.5 weeks, but you'll still get the experience that you probably want. So how do I scope it? I guess what you should try to consider is what have you accomplished in 2 weeks in the past? And now take like 70% of that so that you have a buffer. And this might not be very easy for you to do because you might not remember what you've done in 2 weeks in the past. But the way I would look at it is 2 weeks, and it depends on how many hours you have. Really, number of weeks doesn't mean anything, I guess, because you could be working full time and it turns into 80 hours. Or you could be doing it as like a side project and it turns into 5 hours. But I'll give you an example. So the piano thing, if you type piano, that was the whole typing on a piano. That was about 6 hours from design to coding to the first test on it. So if I were to go try to make like a system out of this in 2 weeks, I could probably add a UI onto that. I could probably, I don't know, put like a customization layer maybe, and that's about it. I don't think I could do anything too crazy. And that is having the experience, knowing maybe how to scope this stuff. So just be very careful. Know that scope tends to creep, as in it tends to just spiral out of control, that it's very easy to add things. So try to pare it down to exactly what you want at the beginning. And think about it from the terms of minimum viable product. So what do you need in order to kind of prove that this project worked? Yeah, I totally agree with this, Kiwi Jim. Mentoring and encouragement in the workplace is an oft missed thing. Yeah, it's just what I was saying earlier. You know, you get into a hobby, someone says, oh, hey, that painting doesn't look very good. And now you're like, well, I'll never paint again in my life. It's kind of the same thing that can happen at a job. You get to a job, you start out and you think, man, I don't know anything. If you get any indications from other people that, hey, you don't know anything, you're really doing poorly here, it's going to make you want to quit that job. So the more you can help somebody out, the more you can know that they've got a safety net for everything, the better they'll do. Worry that if I overscope, it'll be unsatisfying, like I didn't get enough done. Oh, yeah. I'm not suggesting, I know you were responding to this when I was saying this. I'm not suggesting that you aim for a 2-year long thing. I'm suggesting that you aim for probably like a 1.5 week project, and then you give yourself 2.5 weeks of time. And that way you should be able to accomplish it. And almost always, I mean, look, what software project out there can you say is just 100% totally done? That's it. No one ever needs to touch this again. That's very rare. So even if you made like a simple chat bot or something, you could always say like, okay, we'll have commands, we'll have colorful messages, we'll have what I don't know, a million other features you could do, a web interface, blah blah blah. So that if you get to 1.5 weeks and you decide I could actually do another week, well, just tackle another command or something then, or another feature. Okay, let me see. I'm 2 questions behind. Minimum or most? So minimum viable product, what this is supposed to represent is it's the least you have to do to have some semblance of a product. So it's not talking, the minimum is not talking about like well, I guess it kind of is doing the least that it can to fit that qualification. So they kind of use an example, I guess, when they're talking about vehicles. Like imagine if you have a truck, like you want something that drives. Well, all right, this is kind of silly. I'm not going to go with a truck if we're talking about software. Let's just talk about software. Let's say you're making Visual Studio Code. You don't need syntax highlighting. You don't need tabs. You don't need like a command palette. You need a text editor at first. That's like the simplest path through this product that lets you still accomplish your goal. And then if people like that, you can start adding on these features that they want. Try to really encourage junior people and make them feel it's okay to try and fail and not try at all. Yeah. That's to do with 100% done. That's a myth. Oh, use min or most. Yeah. And then that just comes down to a term, and you can always define terms. All right, next question. Studying software dev in college, not computer science, and we don't touch on things like big O notation, binary trees, more math stuff. It seems most big companies require things like that. Do you have a resource for learning that on my own, or is it not needed? This is a good question to ask you first, which is how many years in are you? Because you're not going to be taught this in like, on day number 1 or something, but you probably should be taught about things like big O notation, algorithms. I think you should be taught those things by the end of the degree. So if they're not covering that second year, okay. So I guess the very first thing I would do is find out if it's in the cards for the future. Like, is a class going to cover this? Yeah, I unfortunately don't have a Q length command. I think we're maybe a couple questions behind. Yeah, is it in the cards in the future? And if not, do I have any resources for this stuff? So I think there's something, the Big O cheat sheet or something like that. This. No, I guess this isn't exactly what I was thinking about. Okay, I don't think I have a resource off the top of my head because this is what I would use for finding out, okay, how can we do these things? But if you don't know what O of log n means, you'd want a different resource. So yeah, I don't have too much on that, I guess. But with binary trees, math stuff, etc., a lot of this you can get through these kind of coding problems that you do. And so there's a site called LeetCode. There's I think something called HackerRank. There's like a million of these. So you could probably just search for LeetCode alternatives and you'll find them. And what you'll find, just to kind of paint your expectations here, here's what I think your experience will be like. You'll get a problem and it'll say something like, how would you find the shortest path through whatever, I don't know, it's just something, right? And you're like, well, I have no idea. That's probably going to happen quite a lot. And what you're probably going to do is maybe you take a stab at it, maybe you don't, and then you go click the look at solution button. You click this and you see what did somebody else do and why did they do it? And that might be your path through this at first, which is just, I don't necessarily know, so I'm going to go find out how they knew. Now I'm going to go research all these new terms that I found. So things like best first search, what does that mean? Things like what is an acyclic graph? You might go learn about some of these terms and then realize like, oh, okay, cool. And then you learn what you're not, I guess, learning yet through your degree. And that way it can build on itself naturally. And even when I was studying, this is what I was doing too. I would take a stab at the problem and then I always made sure to check the solution afterward to see what other people did. And usually you found some creative way of solving this where you're like, I didn't think of that at all. And then you try to find the patterns in what would make you think of that next time. And so you do end up finding things. It's like, okay, let's say you have an array and let's say it's unsorted. Well, what can you do with unsorted arrays? You can just iterate over every single element to try to find something. Well, maybe you could sort it first. Maybe you could put it in a different data structure. Maybe you could, and so you build up these patterns as you go through and they help you solve these problems in the future. So I think you shouldn't worry about it too much if your degree is going to cover it. And if your degree isn't going to cover it, then I would try to find some resources online. And unfortunately, I can't give you more specifics. I'm sorry. But chat might be able to share some that have helped them. Yeah, and let me talk really briefly about what big O notation represents. So if you guys have ever heard this before and you're always like, what is big O notation? So it's a way of measuring some dimension of an algorithm, so usually time or space, in a way that lets you know how it grows with input size. So how does that time or space grow with input size? And so if you're used to math terms, this is talking about asymptotic growth. So let's think of, let's just kind of paint a couple of really simple scenarios here. Let's say this is your input size and this is let's say the time complexity. So let's say you have a function that you take in a number and it just returns that number multiplied by 2. So this is something that's done in constant time. So as the input grows, it's always going to take the same amount of time. You might have something that grows in linear time. So as your input grows, you're just tacking on more operations. This is something where, like, imagine if you had for I in range, like, number of people, and you said, like, add person to database, person I. Like, every new person you add is a new operation you need to do. So it's going to grow like this, maybe. You might have something that grows like this, or really any number of things. and what time complexity is talking about is how can we judge how good this algorithm is in terms of whatever dimension we were analyzing it across. And so that's my very brief intro to this, talking as though I'm just, I don't know, giving you a teaser for when you look into this on your own, when you search for something. Okay, let me see if I covered everything there. Yep, okay, cool. So let's get the next question. So we're on question 21 of 25. Why is there no note tool that satisfies me? I went from Google Docs to Evernote to Notion to OneNote. Feels like every tool comes with big downsides. Are you happy with OneNote, or did you just accept the state? I think that what I was looking for, I tend to list out what are my requirements of any sort of tool. And so with Twitch chat, you see that I'm using something called Yada. This is what Hideo had made. There are certain things that I wanted out of a Twitch chat tool, and Hideo helped build that tool. And yeah, I think this is great. So same thing with note taking. What is it you want? And so for me, the most important thing I think back then was syncing to all devices that I use, which meant that it had to be on those devices. So for example, I was taking notes from my phone. I was taking notes, I think, from an iPad back then. I was taking notes from my computer. So it had to be everywhere. This isn't such a problem nowadays. Almost every note-taking program will do this. I wanted formatted notes. So I wanted things like bold text, whatever. I wanted pictures to be in them. I like generally having a table of contents. Now, I'm listing these things out for myself. Of course, these are not your concerns maybe. And OneNote does not do all of these things. So it doesn't have a table of contents. Its search, while I used to think it was good, it's now kind of bitten me a couple of times. And so yeah, I would list out what's important to you and then find out which one ticks enough of those boxes. And then just go with that. And yeah, maybe work around the things you don't have. If you really wanted to, you might be able to make your own app that does this, but I think that's more of a hassle than it's probably worth. Ton of really good CS lecture series available online. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Hey, Boo Rocks. Can you take notes on your toaster? You can draw on your bread with butter. Yes. Hey, Beck. How do you approach learning topics that you find difficult to understand without burning out? That's a good question. So this is what was kind of happening for me for the whole Adam Learns section of last year. So roughly like February to about June. And so there'd be these topics like making an NES ROM, for example. This is very challenging from the perspective of like everyday development. It is not, oh, go download a library, follow the documentation, and you're done. It's like dissect a bunch of information and yeah, try to make sure you don't burn out as you do it. So I think the biggest thing to focus on here is kind of scope and time. How much are you putting in? How much do you feel you're getting out? And so let's say it was very, very dense material. I probably wouldn't set out to do like 3 hours per night about this. I'd probably set out to do maybe half an hour. And I find that if you slowly build up, it's easier than starting out strong and then kind of dying down, because that way you'll end up getting demotivated. So yeah, break off chunks of the topic if you can. Set reasonable goals for yourself. And the goals at first might be something like put in 30 minutes and not something like by the end of tonight, I'll have a working game or something like this. So it's burnout. I think a lot of times comes from your expectations just not getting hit. And those expectations could be anywhere on the board. So they could be how much time you planned on spending, how much progress you think you'd made. I think almost every single developer out there probably has a story where they sat down to do something and they thought, oh, this is going to take like half an hour. And then 6 hours later, they realized that, oh, my keyboard wasn't plugged in, or I don't know. That's a really silly problem because you'd realize it earlier on. But some like OS level problem was happening, or you had the wrong file name, or if only I'd called the right function, I had a typo there. Like that's happened almost all of us. And when you set out to do something and you've got the expectation that I'm going to make lots of progress, and then that doesn't happen, that leads to burnout much faster. So yeah, I think split it into chunks. And also like celebrate your successes with it. That'll also help stave off burnout. Like it's been a week, you've made some progress. You think back to before you started and think, I couldn't have done this. And really celebrate that. Like I learned this, that was me. And yeah, I think that'll help fight the burnout a little bit. Use notability chosen by ranking features like that. Yeah, this is, I find that this really helps me. So I think that most engineers are probably like right up there with analyzing things quite a lot. And you might end up with analysis paralysis. I have a now bulletproof method for fighting analysis paralysis. It's take your best decision from the last 10 seconds and then commit to it. This has worked for me now, I think since I came up with it 3 times, and I didn't come up with this that long ago. And it's great because the whole point of analysis paralysis is that you've analyzed it enough to the point where you're not making any progress. You're paralyzed. So stop analyzing it. Just take what you thought was best and then commit to it. And the committing to a part is important because that way you don't question it again. And then in the future, if something comes up, okay, fine, you might be able to make a different decision. But yeah, I really did feel paralyzed many times in my life about these things, and even from sort of small decisions sometimes. It's bulletproof. Hey, Goose. Literally working on a half an hour problem right now. Yeah. And it's just such a bad feeling because you just keep thinking like, I know by the end of this, I'm going to come up with something where it was just like, you needed to snap your fingers the right way beforehand. And then, yep, it would have just worked perfectly. And I won't have learned anything through it. And yeah, this is where expectations work against us. Hey, Invisible. Oh, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Appreciate what you're doing here. I've been a software developer for a decade. My career seems to plateau. Don't enjoy my job at all. Wondering if I should change my career. Do you mind adding the same text to add queue? If you don't mind, because I'm trying to keep everyone kind of in the same like order. If you, by the way, if anyone is like, I got to get going and I really want to answer my question, always feel free to chat with me on Discord or something. And same thing, Goose, if you don't mind using the add queue and then just copy pasting your message from before. And if you guys can't do this for whatever reason, just let me know. I'll keep your messages here for now, but if I find them through the queue system, that'd be best. How many seconds should we analyze which was the best? Yeah, so this is what I was kind of saying. I know this sounds like it's in jest. I hope it's in jest because I'm responding as though it's in jest. But like I said, analysis paralysis comes about because you've done all the analyzing you can. So analyzing won't fix the problem, and that's what was the key thing for figuring out for me. Like Louis Kate. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So we're on question 23, 26. How do you learn more complex stuff in programming that's not just Googling or watching one video? For example, you want to find out how to build better architecture for your project, MVC, MVVM, something else. Might not choose the best examples. Yeah, so in this case, this is what actual research is for. And that's pretty much all it comes down to. So let's say you wanted to learn something like MVC. How would you go about doing it? So I would start with the Googling way. I still think this is the best fast way of doing things because maybe you find out there's the best book out there or there's a resource or something like that. And then, yeah, I would try applying it myself. I would try looking at others' code and I would try talking to people who know it. These are all things that are going to give you some clearer path, if not just the knowledge you're seeking. So for example, by Googling this, you find the book. Finding the book is not the knowledge. You have to go read the book and take notes and try things out. But now you have a path. And in my mind, that's all you're trying to do here. So a lot of software engineering is about you take an ambiguous problem, you come up with a path to the solution, then you execute on that path. So we have a problem of how do I learn design patterns, or how do I, whatever other examples you've given me that maybe may not have even, like better architecture or something like that. Your problem is just come up with the solution. Well, what's the path? It's not even do that path yet. So yeah, that's where all these things work. Talk to other people. Look at GitHub for examples that might exist already. And this generally is a pretty fast path for this, by the way. So I've been doing this quite a lot recently. I've been like, I wonder what it's like to whatever, like get promoted at this company or be a manager or something. And I schedule a half-hour meeting with somebody and I ask like 10 different questions. And that gives me more perspective on what I should look into afterward. Thank you for adding that, Invisible. And Goose, thank you too. Yeah, and I will get to those. Maybe I should say something like 20. Yeah. I'd like to fix up this whole question system. I think itself, it will be a project. And I don't know when I would find the time to work on it, but I can do these small changes at the very least. Build things because you want to, that cause you to experience the advantages and disadvantages. Push NoSQL until you wish it was relational. Yeah, I think this is good if you have the time to do this, because a lot of people have like work time and then afterward they've got some other obligations, responsibilities, or just kind of whatever desires. Maybe you just want to watch TV for some time. And you can't necessarily just test out technologies at work. Like, yeah, imagine if you're like, I just feel like coding in Rust today, and you just change the code base around. So if you can do that, yes, I definitely think that's good. It's taking what you thought might be good advice, testing it out, seeing where the pros and cons are for yourself. There's just something to that. I was just saying this the other day. What did it take for me to do myself before I realized it was a big, big mistake? I don't remember. But yeah, sometimes you just need to experience it. Someone told me a quote, something like, any idiot can learn from others' mistakes. But it takes a lot to learn, or wait, no, from your own mistakes. That's what it was. but it takes a lot to learn from other people's mistakes. Like you see someone do something that you think is not the smartest. How do you stop yourself then from doing that? Make the question system open source-ish. Yeah, that could probably be done. I guess I'll write it down. I'm not going to think about this right now, at least. How often people are ghosting a meeting of such sort? I'm not sure this question means TechCrunchy. Although I don't mind you clarifying with another question, but please do use the add queue command for it. Easier to respond live to the current question. Yeah, I think so too. So thank you for suggesting it. So hey Adam, I'm trying to learn coding by myself and I want to go fast and learn a lot of things, but literally can't start coding. I read textbooks, finish a lot of tutorials and courses, and finally every time I finish, the same problem occurs. I should learn that thing too. Okay, wait. So at first, when you said literally can't start coding, I took this to mean something like I consume these materials, but then I don't know how to apply them. But then at the end of the message, it sounded more like I just want to keep learning and not necessarily doing. Hey, Johnny. So if it was the first one, I would say, I'm going to kind of respond to both of these, although you're probably still in chat and can just tell me. But if it was the first one, I would say, try applying as you go. Yeah, I'm in the present because we have the queue system now. And if it's the second one okay, it's the second one. Yeah. So I consume these materials, but then I find out more things I want to learn and go learn those too. Okay. So what I would ask is, what's the problem? And I don't say this facetiously. You're learning things. You find out that you want to learn more. You go learn more. To me, that's not an issue. Where there could be an issue is, let's say you were on the job and you're like, hey, I have a task, and the task is whatever, make a database. And you're like, oh, I went and learned about databases, and then I found out about servers and load balancing, and now I'm like learning how DNS works. And it's like, okay, that's a problem, right? You were tasked with making a database, and now you're learning about like DNS. That doesn't help you. But if this is literally like your free time and you're learning about things, sounds like everything's going totally fine. So I have a feeling you have a problem in mind, because otherwise, I mean, this advice is not really great advice. It's just saying like, yeah, there's no issue. Although maybe that's a perspective you need. I don't know. Hey, Felix. JavaScript framework problem. You learn one and a new one pops up. That's the new hotness. Yeah, I think that risk of just getting sucked into always learning the newest thing or being on the bleeding edge, I think there's a certain amount of awareness of that you should have, a certain amount of tinkering in that you should have. So like, let's say you knew Angular and React came out, and I don't know the timeline, so maybe this actually was not possible for this to happen, but you were comfortable with Angular and now this new framework comes out. You should probably at least look into, what are the marketing materials of React? Like, what do they promise? What do they do? Because that doesn't take very long. That's, 5-10 minutes, something like that. Ideally, you take it from there. So like the first one is a sort of marketing materials and overview. Ideally from there, you might take it to like, let's prototype a very tiny project in React. And then maybe from there, you start to assess whether it's good for your situation, I'll just say. Yeah. Best advice for learning: if you watch videos, use different variable names. You'd be surprised how much more you need to be focused. Oh, that's a pretty good tip, actually. Yeah. I think my best advice is just take notes as you go. Just rewrite your app every once. You gotta learn that you can't learn it all without applying some of it as you go. Otherwise, you'll never gain the experience and nuances of it all. Yeah, yeah. And the other thing too is, you can be effective at almost any level of all of this. Let's say you're let's say that you divided this into two different aspects: learning and doing. And let's say you were 100% on the learning side. You never even touched a computer. You just had textbooks and you learned about your technologies that way. That is still effective at some job. Not a developer job, because you're not actually doing anything, right? You're learning, but it's still effective at something. You can still then guide people's decisions. You can write design documents. And let's say you were on the 100% doing aspect of things. You're kind of like doing grunt work, let's say. That's still effective at some job. And guess what? Any ratio in between is also still effective at something. So don't feel like, we always look at the grass is always greener. And we think of people who are like, oh man, they're doing more than I am, or they're learning more than I am, and I wish I were in that situation. for your own mental health, like, sure, you could try shifting yourself one way or another, but I think it's probably better to just be comfortable with kind of where you are. And that doesn't mean stop working, stop applying yourself, stop learning, but maybe don't try shifting things around so much. Maybe things aren't as bad as you think. Things got kind of generic at the end there. Redo it like 10 times when I'm new to it. Yeah, I think everyone has a strategy they like for learning. And at the end of the day, that's always going to be my advice is like, find what works for you and then apply what works for you. And that's going to be my advice for every single industry, for every topic or problem. And those are both very big things that you can dive into. As a junior Java developer, I can say that real situations and problems are different, difficult, and complex in course tutorial. Yeah, you'll run into this for sure. This was like every physics problem says, imagine a spherical cow. It's like, okay, let's cut out wind resistance and whatever else, and you just focus on whatever the problem wants you to. The real world doesn't have that. There's more ambiguity. Okay, let's go this next question. Once you start working as a full-time engineer, it's hard to find the right time and energy to work on side projects after a long day at work. Do you have any tips on that? Thanks. I have some thoughts on this, even if they're not necessarily tips. So one is, if you're new to a job, you'll have less energy than when you're old to a job. and so it's like, don't fight that. Don't try to do more than you can. I started my job about 3.5 months ago. I am exhausted at the end of every day. When I wasn't exhausted, when I wasn't tasked with doing as many things, yeah, I was pursuing things on the side. Now that has almost completely died down. And I'm hoping that in another few months, I'll have felt like, okay, I can start balancing things again. Two, so hard to find the time and energy to work on this. I say two is like, you can always scope down your side project and you can always come up with these sort of motivational tricks. So scoping down your side project, I'd say is pretty straightforward. It's like, okay, I was going to make all of Facebook. Let me just cut it down to, I'm going to make an endlessly scrolling news feed. Okay, you scoped it down, pretty straightforward. Motivational tricks, something that I liked doing, I came up with a mindful to-do list and a mindless to-do list. And a mindless to-do list would be like, recolor the graphics that I had. And a mindful to-do list would be like, design a new system. What I did find though is that as time went on, doing aspects of the mindful to-do list was not very easy, because now it just became the difficult problems to-do list. And I got through enough of the mindless ones, but this can still help you feel like you're making progress on something and know that it's working towards something. Hey, Mousy. Hang on, I've skipped like 10 lines of chat. Let me see. You're really good at basics. Yep. Most jobs consist mostly of grunt work, not so much applying theoretical concepts. Yeah, when I kind of classified things in this dichotomy of learning versus doing, and then I said that all doing would just be grunt work, I don't think any job really comes down to 100% doing. I don't think that really exists. I think it's going to be like 98% doing and 2% learning. You still have something you're going to need to do, something you can apply. And chances are most jobs are more like maybe like a 70-30 split. But yeah, this is me talking in the hypothetical, and yeah, most jobs align somewhere on that scale. Can you draw that curve? I think it'd be different for everybody. And I think it basically just boils down to, at the beginning, cost more energy. Afterward, you develop an equilibrium. That's hard to type on autopilot. Yeah, prefer to scope down work projects. Yeah, so Mousie, how's it going? I saw you're staying on top of Cash App and Kipoga's stream. Yeah, no problem, Master. Trying to learn from tutorials or videos constantly and not trying to apply for shows a lack of confidence. Confidence can be built. I'm not totally sure what you're saying here. Lack of confidence. Oh, maybe you're saying that if you're just getting in the habit of learning things and not doing it, it's because you might not feel confident doing them. That's entirely possible. That's where I would say, if you find that you're going through a whole technology, you've read a handbook, you've watched a video, and you haven't done anything, and then you feel like you wanted to do something, you should start doing something sooner. Such a bad way to advertise. Oh, I just hit my desk. Yeah, I wonder, it must be working for them. I guess we're talking about them now, although in a negative light. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. So advice on balancing, don't make decisions in isolation and be an independent dev at work. How to know when I've struck a good balance? Oh, I think I see what you're saying. You're saying that you shouldn't make decisions in isolation, but you should be an independent developer. So here's how I kind of look at this. This boils down to knowing when to involve people. Let's say you are tasked with designing a system. This is a system that you are not going to be the only person to interact with, most likely. Other people will code it, other people will use it, other people might test it, other people might inherit it if you leave the company. If you were to make those decisions in isolation, that would be bad, because then you're not taking the input of many other experienced developers. And more importantly, it's not even really just their experience level necessarily. They might have a perspective that you've never thought of. Maybe they came up with something where it was like, you didn't think of localization or accessibility or security, and they give you this idea and you're like, oh man, yeah, this changes the design completely. As opposed to if you just went and did something and then a month or two later you come back and they're like, you had these pretty glaring problems. Why didn't you come and talk to us about it? Now, the independent developer part of this is like, you shouldn't necessarily need help in scheduling those meetings with people or asking the right questions necessarily. It's and so there is this line of, like I said, when do you involve people? So let's say a task is scoped down. Let's say you got something where it was like, implement a logging system that rotates files. So something. These examples never really matter. But let's say you had something like this. This might be scoped well enough where you're kind of expected to just be able to handle it. That does not mean don't ask questions. You should still ask questions. And if you need help after a while, you should still ask for help. But I think what they're trying to get at here is, don't get in the habit of, oh, I asked a question, I got an answer, so I'm just going to keep asking all of my questions and not actually do any of the work on my own. What if you're the only one that'll ever touch it? It's hard to say that this will be the case, but even if that were the case, I think it's still worth asking other people for advice. So at a company, if you're literally the only person who will ever touch it, and even if you got fired, this thing would die with you, probably it's not a valuable thing for the company. That's my guess. But if in this hypothetical it truly were and they decided that, that doesn't mean that you can't improve the value by involving people a little earlier. Hey, Hamida. Okay. And hey, Tiburon. Yeah, long time no see indeed. How you doing? Let's get the next question. Any advice for dealing with complicated build systems? You barely know, breaking in opaque ways. Front-end code packaging producing weird errors. The build system's already there when I started the job and I don't know it that well, but I still have to use it. Yeah, this is definitely a tough one. So what I tend to do is I start a note on the build system and I put a troubleshooting section at the bottom and make sure to add to it all the time. So you came across an error where it spit out this like invalid status code 7 and you're like, okay, I don't know what to do at all. So now what you do is you like find out the answer to any problems. And this you do through the same general way, like Stack Overflow, asking coworkers, and just investigating on your own. And then you write down your notes at the end of all of this. What your goal should be is that you're getting to a point where you've basically written the documentation specifically for your problems for this build system. And I found this to help so many times. I was running into an issue where, let me see if I can find this for you guys. Yeah, this. Okay, so I was using something called MDX, which is Markdown for JSX, I guess. And I ran into a problem where when I typed a $sign, so I type a $sign, and then I would just hit Control S. And what would happen is it would save it as $sign. And I'm like, what in the world is going on here? I did not type $sign, and it ruined the output that I was getting. And so I eventually traced this down to, this is a problem with Prettier, the formatter that I was using through Visual Studio Code. And two things happened. One, I ran in this problem again in the future, and then I looked at my note and I solved it within like 10 seconds. And two, someone else ran in this problem on Discord and they're like, I have no clue what's going on here. And I'm like, I got you covered. And I sent them this, and yeah, it helped solve their problem. It wasn't the exact same thing, but it was pretty close. Oops, I still need this. So yeah, getting that customized troubleshooting section, building that corpus of notes, I think that's really good. Even though you learn something, you don't try to do things. So you just keep learning by watching videos. I see what you're saying. Like, it feels good to feel like you've learned. You don't ever need to prove that you've learned something if you just keep learning. So you get in that cycle. Yeah. Hey, Ramu. How you doing? Okay, we are on question 28 of 30. Yeah, so finally I'm getting an invisibles question. So, hey, Adam, long-time lurker. Appreciate what you're doing here. I've been a software developer for a decade. My career seems to have plateaued. I don't enjoy my job to the point of changing career. Guess every advice, mostly in the area, loosely boils down to what are your goals and what do you want to do? However, I find this quite challenging. Never been able to answer this. Okay, so Invisible, this is a really good time to be asking this question because here's what happened. I did group mentoring stream number 1, number 2, and now we are here. But in between this, like, I got another mentee here. And some of the things that I'm realizing are that probably roughly the 10-year point in a software engineer's career is what I would call like mid-career crisis. I'm just making up a number, but I imagine probably about 20 years is maybe the average time that, what is a mentee? The opposite of a mentor. So the person that you're mentoring. I imagine that about 20 years is how long people tend to stay in software engineering. Again, I'm just making up this number, but it doesn't really matter. And yeah, right around this time is when, here's what's happened. And maybe I should write a post about this or something. But basically, you go to school and you're in school for somewhere between, well, let's just say like 12 to 16 years of your life on average. So like 5 to 18 is when you're in kind of whatever you call it, lower education, I don't know what. And then like 18 to 22 or something is when you're, so anyway, you're in school for like the majority of your life. And how do you know you're doing well in school? You know you're doing well in school because you get grades and pretty much you get grades. Like you get grades on something, and so you know, like, oh, I did 100% on this class and I did a 70% on this class. Then you get to your career, and for the first maybe like 1 to 3 years, how do you know you're doing well? You know you're doing well via like promotions and performance reviews. Then for the next maybe like from year 4 to, I don't know, 8, it's kind of dying down a bit of how do you know you did well. Then for years like 8 plus, now you're on your own, right? Like you pave your own way. And this is difficult, I think. You don't necessarily just get promoted automatically. A lot of companies will have some kind of quick path for you there, but then you become a senior principal or staff developer, something like that. And you're like, okay, is this it? Am I tackling problems? Do I like what I'm doing? Is the day-to-day fun? Are the challenges of software engineering going to keep me engaged for another 5 or 10 years? And I think this is maybe one of the first times in your whole life, if you think about it, where it's like there is no clear path to what's best or what's next. And so you start questioning a lot. And that sounds like it's what's happening for you right now of like, I don't know what my goals are. I don't know how to decide this. Like, yeah, any path could work, but how do I know 10 years from now I'm going to be in the right spot? And so here's what I think will help cut through this, because maybe I've done a good job at defining the problem, but I haven't talked about how to address it at all. I think it is very much examining what will make you happy in a day-to-day job. Is it something like, is it work-life balance? Is it solving hard problems? Is it working on cool technology? Working with cool people? Is it anything? Like, what could this be? And then finding out what's important, yeah, which again boils down to the what are your goals here. So I think I need to hear a little bit more about what have you liked, what haven't you liked. Yeah, I've disabled the ability to sub. Yeah, I disabled that a long time ago, actually. Hey, Raymond. So if you have anything more to add, Invisible, I'd love to try tackling this problem a little bit, but I think it's very, very tough. And the last time I think I helped anybody with this, it took at least an hour of just back and forth like Q&A to find some more to find a path that might work. Okay, let me read this. What is your opinion on middle management and what constitutes good middle management? I'm not sure what the context of this might be exactly. My opinion on middle management in general is it's necessary. I don't think you could really have a company without it. You need people to manage kind of the day to day. You need people to manage the product. You need people to manage the people. And so, from that perspective, maybe this isn't what you're looking for, but yeah, I think it's necessary. So, what constitutes good middle management? Good management to me is the thing you're managing doing well. And the thing in this case could be, like I said, it could be a product, could be a technology, could be people, could be a project, I guess. And now how you do this is one of those like, well, it all depends on what we're talking about, who likes what this thing needs. So let's say we're talking about a product and it needs to be out the door in like 3 weeks. Okay, well, good management is probably going to cut out all of the scope that you need or that you would have needed if you had all the time in the world. They're probably going to make sure people are working on the highest priority things. Let's say you were managing people and you were wondering if you're a good people manager. Well, your metrics might be, are people happy with their careers? Is their morale high? Are they moving up as they expect to be moving up? Are they accomplishing their own goals? And so you'd have these kind of litmus tests. If there's more context, I'd be happy to answer more about this. It's kind of my view on this for right now. Okay, next question. Wanted to start a project that could benefit from a template asset on the Unity asset store. My worry being that I end up stuck with problems due to the asset. But I also don't want to spend months making systems that I could have got from a template. Wonder if anyone else has used a big template type. Yeah, so here's what I've kind of seen whenever I've done this, because this definitely happens. You don't want to make a library, so you use someone else's, and now you're stuck with their problems. So how do you combat this? One is a little bit of research into the library. So hang on one sec. Okay, just a sec. So research into the library. What problems have others faced? What does the library do? And what support do they offer? How frequently do they release updates? And then this question of, is it open source? Could I make changes myself? I think that's pretty important too, because this is certainly a risk. And the way I see it is using someone else's code will never have zero cost, but cost shouldn't be as high as coding it yourself. So as long as it's saving you some time, then your only question is that amount of time saved worth the money that I'm spending on it? So yeah, if the asset is like $10, I'd say, yeah, go for it and see when you run into a problem. And then, maybe you can even help the developer out and give them feedback. Say something like, this is where I'd like to see it go. What am I using for the question queue? I coded something for like, I don't know, the half hour before the stream, just 2 simple commands. It's right here, basically. It's add queue just pushes to an array, and get queue just pops from the array. Well, shifts, not pops. Also, hey, George. Okay, next question. Could you compare pros and cons of content creation, writing articles, making videos, versus a side project as a way to learn and a way to start side income? Pros and cons of content creation versus side projects as a way to learn. I don't think content creation has been a way to learn for me. But that's very weird in my specific situation, because my content creation was making Twitch videos of me learning. So I don't think that's what you mean exactly. I think what you meant is like, I find out about some technology like React and I go write a blog post on React rather than writing a project on React. I don't think many people probably do this. I think they probably learn a bit and then they make the post on that. What kind of triggers do you use for the bot to fetch those questions? It's just, so this is Phantom Bot and they're just chat commands. So whenever a command comes in, if it's add queue or if it's get queue, we just do certain things. So yeah, I don't know how big this is exactly of a question. Hang on one sec. I'll be right back. Okay. Yes, this is the newest chair. Yeah. I think I have a... No, I don't have a new chair command, actually. Okay, yeah, so next question. I'm working on a CRM, CMS web app. I thought I'd build it quite robust in terms of extensibility, but as it grows, I keep getting lost. Any tips managing such a system? Yeah, when this happens, I think scope creep can sometimes lead to sort of forgetting the original design and forgetting how pieces interact with each other. And so you end up with this sort of like nightmare octopus. I don't know what that means. Um, yeah. Anyway, you cobble together something and all of a sudden it's got all these tentacles and you just think, oh, this is not the creature I designed. I think what you should come down to is how would you write a design to unify the system? And then think of what you need to do to get to that point and kind of whether it's worth doing that. So basically, you have a system and you have like feature A, feature B, feature C, and that's what you originally designed. Okay, cool. Everything's working great. Now you start adding on these new features, features D, E, and F, and they don't fit your design. So now I'd say like stop and just look at what you've got. How would you have designed this if you were to start from scratch? So if you started from scratch, how would you have designed this? And now you ask, how do I get there from where I am? This is, I think, a pretty good way of doing things, and not, so it's not, how do I get there from scratch? It's very rarely the best to throw out your work completely. So it's go back to the design, think of how you'd get there, and then start working toward that. You'll probably have some refactoring to do, but it'll probably make more sense. There is one caveat here, I would say, which is that if you're new enough to coding, it may actually make sense to throw everything out. So let's say you're like year one into coding and you started making a game and you realize this is way too complex. Like it might be better to just start over. So that all depends on, do you have users? What was your goal with the project? How long do you have to work on this? So I wasn't a washing machine. Well, the problem was my wife is listening to an audiobook. She's showering right now, and so she's got a Bluetooth speaker that's playing that book so loudly that it's coming through the walls. And an audiobook is copyrighted content, and I don't want the stream picking that up. I need a good chair, but I hesitate to spend like $400 on a good one, not liking it. You should take a look at just a secondhand chair. The last one I got in, I don't know what, like 2014 or something, and it lasted, no, maybe not 2014, maybe like 2017, and it lasted until just a few months ago. And I think it cost me a total of $150. And it was good. I liked it a lot. So I didn't end up spending $400. I got it secondhand. I had to like drive somewhere half an hour away, bring a friend so I didn't get murdered. Or so that we both got murdered. Either one of those would have been fine, but not just me getting murdered. How can you deal with burnout? Do you mind adding this to... Oh, okay. Thank you. Never mind. Ryan, we got you. Okay, cool. All right. Why have your startup endeavors been such solo operations? This is, I think, mostly a consequence of budget. And also a like lack of someone who... Well, here's what I want. I would want a co-founder who can like invest something, so time or money or expertise or something like that, and that I trust and that wants to work with me on the project. This is what I felt was missing from my last two endeavors. I was working with other people, and if you look at the credits command, for example, for Botland or for Adam Learns, there were lots of other people involved. And so like I don't do artwork. I will probably never do artwork. I don't do design. And there were some legal things that happened. There's voice acting. When I say legal things, I mean like the terms of service, the privacy policy, the business itself. These are all things that I needed to involve other people for. At the end of the day, what I wanted was a co-founder. And this is what was maybe the biggest form of my stress in the last few years, was not having a co-founder. At the start of a project, you've generally got ideas and a lot of energy. And as you start carving out those first pieces of this marble, the energy dies down a bit and you start to work on these ideas, and then problems start to arise. And it's at that point where you want somebody else to be as responsible as you are for just bouncing ideas off of. And if you don't have that, you go to your friends or your family, but they're not as invested. So they'll give you advice, but they don't maybe know all the context. You have to fill them in every time. And it's very time consuming and kind of stressful to even do that. And it might be stressful for them. So I think it just kind of, I think I need to find the right person and know that we work well together and everything. But this is basically like finding a relationship. It is a type of relationship, it's a professional one, but I'm comparing it very much to romantic ones, in that there's like the right person for you out there for starting a business. You marry two people in your life. AC17R. So it's not that I think solo is better. No, it's not that I think solo is better. I think solo is probably better for very small projects. Like, let's say you wanted to get something done in a week or two, you probably don't need to involve other people. All right, next question. So from Fancy Pixel, how can you deal with being burned out? Like lately, I haven't really been coding, but every time I get a coding task for an interview, I do it. But other than that, I don't do anything. And every time I look at code, I feel like I'm hitting a mental wall. My go-to for this will always be, when was the last time you took a mindful vacation? And what this means is not, it's 7 a.m. and I have work today, I don't feel like it, let me take today off. This is like a non-mindful vacation, kind of by my own terminology here. It's more like, I've been feeling burned out, so I need some time to myself. And then you figure something out. Like, do you want to go somewhere? Do you want to do something? This happened to me as recently as this last week. I worked some overtime and I just couldn't. I knew every time I go past a certain limit of hours in my life that's it. I just need to take a day off. So that's what led to me taking yesterday off. And it's helped so far. I mean, I haven't gone back to work yet because it's Saturday, so I can't say for sure, but that's always what's been the fix to burnout for me. Now, there's two paths through this. One is the time pays off and you feel fine when you go back. Path number 2 hasn't happened to me yet, but it certainly could happen, which is you take the time off, go back, and still feel burned out almost immediately. Guess what this means? It's time for a change. It'd be impossible to say what you need to change exactly, but I have a feeling it's either like job, responsibilities, investment, company, maybe the team that you work on, but something needs to change if you're going back to it and you're still burned out. And the easiest ones to start are probably like time investment, maybe. You can also actually think of any other sort of physical or mental health. Hey, Roro. So are you exercising? Are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? Those sorts of things can also probably contribute to this, although I imagine to a lesser extent than just, I hate my job, gotta find a new job. Yeah, no co-founder for your 2.5 week project. What books do you think every developer should read? Clean code architecture books, which change your way of thinking, or just worth reading? I've not gone the book route for much of my development experience, and I wonder if I'm shooting myself in the foot by doing that. So I don't have books I can recommend on these lines. And every time I always think, oh man, I should probably look into that, I always think I'll just look into it a different way. One thing I don't like about books for learning is that you're trusting the author and the editors. And you're probably getting a very opinionated view from that. And so what I like doing is figuring out what the aggregate of people say about something in general. And so let's say it was about like what does clean coding have to do with that. I guess is harder to get people's opinion of what do you think clean code is, because they would need to define it and really think about it. But in general, if you're talking about something like design patterns, you could always ask someone like, what's been the 2 most helpful design patterns for you? And that could be a good way to triangulate this and get that aggregate. You don't work yet and you're in path 2? Wait, let me reread your question then. See if I... Coding task for an interview. Okay, you might be in a slightly different situation than Fancy Pixel. So, interviewing, I'm just going to say this, generally sucks. And if you're feeling burnout due to interviews, I think that's normal. It's a really sucky normal, but it's normal. Like, interviewing's not typically fun. Practicing these things are generally kind of mundane, and they make you question how much you really know, and it just feels bad. And then you eventually get a job and you're like, oh, it was all just a terrible dream. And then you got to come back to it sometime later. That's kind of just the nature of interviewing, I feel. So if that's what you're talking about, yeah, as much as it sucks to hear, I think that's normal. And I don't know how much you can really do to impact that. Because interviewing is really like the worst of all worlds. You're being judged as a candidate, like directly. This is one of the few times in your life you know you're being judged. That's the whole point of an interview, is to figure out if you're a good fit. You have lots of practice, but not all of it will be fruitful. So you don't know what you're going to be asked exactly, and you have lots of self-doubt during that time. Oh, things like, am I good enough? Am I studying the right things? So there's all this that kind of hits you all at once, and each individual thing here is not so bad on its own, and I could probably offer some advice about it. But yeah, I guess my bottom line is, if that's why you're feeling the way that you feel, it will hopefully get better once you're past the interview phase. Hey, Cyrix, I'm doing well. Howdy. Anecdotal, I like this book, Head First Software Development, A Learner's Companion to Software Development. Yeah, chat, you're welcome to provide any of your book suggestions you have. Also, hey, Richie. Object-oriented programming isn't a design pattern, is it? No, I wouldn't say it's a design pattern. I would say it's a programming paradigm. Now, if you want, you can kind of draw some parallels between the two, but I don't... At that point, we'd just be talking about terminology. So, yeah, in my mind, it's not a design pattern. Because within object-oriented programming, you can apply design patterns. Wrote a blog post on books that are foundational. Yeah, feel free to link it here, Jitter. Why is your advice about interview versus working burnout different? It's the interviews are temporary. Even if you have a really long time interviewing and it took you, let's say, like a year or two, which I hope it doesn't take people that long in general, but let's say it did, that's still temporary. Whereas with your career, it's like, well, once you have a job, it's not like things are just going to magically fix themselves. With an interview, you move past that phase eventually. Seems to me that interviewing before quitting your job has less of a burnout effect. What do you think? I think interviewing is a painful process, at least for myself. So I like to not have a job while I'm doing it. And that way I can focus on all the things I need to do for the interview. But then again, that comes from kind of a very privileged perspective. And I recognize that, like, I've been able to quit the job because I didn't need the money during that time. I am a citizen of this country, so I will still be able to live in the country. There are those sorts of things that come into play there. But it's really, I mean, you'll hear me say this a million times, it's whatever works for you. So if you want to have that job aligned while you're still at your current one, by all means go that route. Yeah, so who had asked about the books here? Let's see. Yeah, so not prawn, you should take a look at what Ted said. Jitter Ted's post. Sounds like a good book. Okay. Oh, wait, I missed this one. How about doing interviews every couple months, every 4 months, just to be secure you have options? If you feel the need to do that, yeah, by all means do it. That sounds a little excessive to me. I think most people keep their ear to the ground without actually just doing interviews every couple months. All right, next question. So I'm a math grad. I've found myself mainly coding and doing software reverse engineer. The nature of the big org I'm in means that my results are what's important. My worry is that I don't have any proof that I'm capable or that my skill set is too broad and not deep. What's your experience of demoing your skills that weren't learned from university? So let's see. So you have a results focused org and you need to prove that you are capable of doing what you kind of say. Is the proof within the org, or do you feel it's for finding a different job? Because if it's within the org, I would say this is probably a combination of just like time and opportunity will lead to these results that you're talking about. And then the other part of this equation that you need to keep in mind is make sure you're mindful of your accomplishments. So for example, if you do something and no one knows, that's a problem in itself. And I've heard this stated a little bit more bluntly of like, if you're doing work and not getting credit, you shouldn't be doing that work. And I'm kind of iffy on that. Like sometimes I feel like you can help improve a team or a technology for the greater good, and you don't necessarily get a reward for it. And like, okay, well, the satisfaction of having done it is a reward in itself. But I can see what they're talking about here. It would be to find another job in the future. Yeah. So then what you kind of need is something that's like portfolio worthy or resume worthy. And something to keep in mind for this is that when it comes to your resume, the people reading it don't necessarily need to see the results. So for example, if you say something like improved performance of X system by 12%, they don't need to have like, you don't need some live example of the old system and a live example of the new system. It's good enough for you to just say that you did this. And that's where your results can come in. Portfolio worthy would be something that, yeah, you could show off. So if whatever you're doing is public, then I guess, yeah, throw it in there. Otherwise, yeah, I would say make sure your accomplishments can be listed out and can be shown that there's business value. So that's generally what they're looking for. Something business value, something quantifiable is usually good. Maybe any other, like any data to back it up that you can have. And that should be it. That should be where your accomplishments are then tangible. Hey, Detonated. Good to see you too. Hope you're doing well. Best language to learn for someone new to interact with primarily web browsers? If it's going to be web browsers, I always feel like JavaScript is the first go-to it should be. Not because it's the best or anything, but because it's the de facto language of the web. And then you can always think of things that compile to JavaScript. Let's get the next question. So I am up to date. Have you kept a log of achievements at work to reference in a yearly review? What I do, and I don't know for sure if the system has been good yet because I've only been at the job for about 3.5 months, but I have a journal and it's a spreadsheet and it has 3 columns. The first column is, well, I guess it technically has 4 columns. I guess I'll just write out what it has. So it has date, it has like task number 1, task number 2, and then kind of like extra notes. And that's it. So I might say something like, okay, date today, task number 1, group mentoring, task number 2, I don't know, maybe like clean the house when I'm not on the job, right? And then my extra notes might say something like, the mentoring was good today. I think the queuing system worked. The house could have gone better in X ways. And then that's it. And so at the end of the year, what I'm hoping I do is I just go through and look at all the tasks and I'm like, group mentoring showed up 6 times. How did that go? Oh, wow, clean the house. That was just once. I forgot all about that. Yeah, wow, I should really write that in my performance review. Something along those lines. So I think this will be really helpful. And by doing this every single day, writing 2 bullet points is not that tough. And I explicitly limit myself to 2 bullet points. If you're doing more than that in a day, chances are it couldn't have been that impactful, or else it would have had to take multiple days. And then the extra notes helps contextualize like, oh, that's why it took 5 days to do. Yeah, because on day 4 I hit that problem, and then on day 6 I solved it, and then so yeah, I think that's pretty good. Okay, I think we're actually caught up on questions now, so I might actually, let me see. Yeah, okay. Let me ask you guys some questions. So first, what did you think of the question queuing? And know that it's still like a prototype, basically. I kind of wanted to just test out what the system was. And then, yeah, actually, that's my first question for now, I guess. This isn't Adam Asks Chat. It's group mentoring. I want the mentoring too. So that was my first question. I guess the other question I have is, do you think I should keep doing these streams? Question number one, awesome. Yeah, I guess I can label these. Please use add Q for questioning chat. Qs are great because you were in the present. Yeah, okay, so sounds like people generally like this. Sounds like I should also have some like better system for this. I wonder if that's what I'll do 2 weeks from now as we just work on this system. Yeah. And question number two. Yeah, so yeah, what do you guys think? Should I keep doing these? Because here's what I generally think about this. This is there was a show on a long time ago called Hey Arnold, and in one of the episodes, the main characters are selling watches in their town, and they get to a point where everyone has a watch. They have no one to sell to. And so they, whatever, like they started a business, right? They got to the point where the market's saturated. Now they can't, their business has no purpose anymore. That's kind of how I feel with this is everyone who was already watching me at this point probably has seen a group mentoring session because this is the third one. And so any questions they've wanted to ask, they've probably asked at this point. So now it's all about, okay, are new people to the stream getting value from this? And I'm not streaming frequently enough for new people to really find me. And it's like Saturday morning in the US. It's what, the afternoon, I guess, for most of EU. And well, now it's evening. And so are people, do they want career advice on a Saturday, that sort of thing? Can you also ask questions privately at the bot or via a web interface? I want to eventually, I think having a web interface would be nice for this. Yeah. Number one works. Number two, please do. Number two, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Might get boring for you as you start to get lots of repeat questions. It hasn't been, that's another concern that I have, but it hasn't been bad so far. And having this be once every couple weeks isn't enough for me to feel like, oh god, another one of these. But maybe it will be eventually. Do you think that'll generate a question or two every couple weeks? I no longer have a backlog. I see. Yeah, because this is the other thing I'm noticing. Now it is 10:47. I've been live for an hour and 48 minutes. That means, and before, maybe due to the question system and how it would work, or maybe just due to the lower viewership, we are kind of like done and wrapping up. And actually, that works well for me because I wanted to get going. But yeah, all right, I'll have to take this into account. Maybe what I'll do next stream, just to kind of mix it up, maybe we'll code the web interface for the question queue. I don't know, something like that. Usually redirecting people to YouTube recordings and videos. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to see about this. Now, if I were to do something like a question queue or an interface or anything like that, I would probably try to make this like as fast as possible. This will help deal with the repeated questions, but then you'll have to redirect to it. What I want to do for this, anytime I feel like there's something that people ask about a lot, I want to lump into a blog post. So with imposter syndrome, I think it works pretty well. For anyone who wants this blog post, by the way, and actually, let me link a couple things. Let me link Discord, if anyone wants to ask any follow-up questions about anything. And let me link in the imposter syndrome thing. Yeah, I could invite a guest. That's another thing I was wondering about. Maybe branch out with the streams a bit. Interview someone, invite a guest. Yeah, there was an idea that I had that I don't think would work well at all, but it's certainly interesting. So are you ready? It would be a mentoring session that is played out live on air. So I have one person and they're sharing, okay, here's where I am with my career. What do I do? And chat can answer and I can answer and we can kind of see this process play out. The reason I think it's a bad idea is because you wouldn't probably want to air all of your personal details to the world. And some of it might be the problems that you're struggling with, like, oh, hey, I think a team member hates me. And now you stream it and the YouTube video gets popular enough where they see it and they're like, oh, that's it. Some people might be fine with that, yeah. Just ignore all of N. Perry's comments. What would, of course, be really interesting is a Twitch extension, so people right below your stream can ask you a question. Yeah, that's true. I have to think of how people could do this on mobile. I guess there would need to be a bot interface for this. Hey, though, you must be somebody else. I don't recognize the name. Oh, I don't remember. Thomas. Oh, yeah. God. Sorry, changing names is so rough on me. Sorry about that. What am I, a lawyer? Are people watching such a long format on mobile? I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. On the tablet, yeah. Okay, well, I think this is good. I hope you guys liked it. I'm going to be putting the YouTube video up probably tomorrow or the next day. The last one took a while because I thought I had made it public and I didn't. So happy Valentine's Day, everybody, for tomorrow. And thanks for joining in. I'll hopefully see you guys on Discord. Oh, I should probably go host somebody. What am I doing trying to say goodbye? This is Twitch, everybody. Who's online? Let's host Yagamoth. Yeah. Okay. /raid. There we go. All right, yeah. See you guys. Bye. Have a good rest of your weekend.